Hello again, this is UML Operator. In this session, we're going to be talking about preferences. In our last session, we spoke about visual style. We chose a particular background or look that we wanted to go for, in this case, Office 2016. We chose a theme, and I'm going to go with dark gray for this session. It's more comfortable for my eyes, and accent colors. You can choose accent colors. So this is more comfortable for my eyes, this background. So I'm going to go with this. And let's get into preferences. Okay, so we start with this preferences dialog box. And on the left side, we have some navigation of preferences that we can change. The first one is general. To begin with, I would type in your name here for author. This is what shows up in every element, diagram, anything that you create yourself. We're in our local environment, but when you get in a team environment, you want to make sure that you're identified as the author of various diagrams, models, elements, and other work. I recommend that you take screenshots as we're moving through this to capture your current settings so you can play around, and if you make mistakes and want to know where to go back, you'll have those screenshots to look at. Now, I'm not going to cover everything in detail. I'll cover that in other videos and online tutorials that I will give you access to. But we're going to skim through the most important parts of preferences to help you get started. You'll notice in Sparx in every dialog box, there's a help button. Please use this. It'll be good to have this up and available to you when you're doing work so that you're able to understand everything that's going on in a particular dialog box. So in this case, I selected help for general options. It steps you through what author is and some other details. And I'm going to skip over default project directory, portal guides. Your admin, your Sparx admin or yourself may set those up, and we'll talk about that in more detail later. All right, as stated, I'm going to skip over these three, cover those much later. So project browser, confirm deletes, leave this checked till you get very comfortable with deleting things. Leave that checked to confirm. Because if you delete something out of the Sparx database, it's gone. There's no undo, right? Free sorting, I don't check this. We'll talk about this and demo this a little bit later on. This will be up to you whether you want to do free setting. Show stereotypes, leave that checked. Sort diagrams above packages. Don't check this until we get into other modeling. I'll show you the difference between free sorting and sort diagrams above packages. Okay, let's go into window behavior. Window behavior, again, take a screenshot of your current settings. You're going to play around with things here and determine what you want as your preferences. But top to bottom, left to right. We start with main window, always open maximized. So when you're launching Sparx, this is up to you whether you want to open it maximized every time you launch or whether you don't. I don't at this particular point, but I'll leave that up to you. You can check this or leave that unchecked. Hide diagrams caption bar. All right, let me move preferences down so we can see the tabs and then the caption bar. So I'm going to select hide and you can see it's gone. If you need that much more space, you're on a laptop or smaller screen, you may want to take some of these tips and minimize these things. However, this one, I don't want to hide it. Sometimes I have long diagram names across these tabs, so I'm going to leave it unhidden. Let me show you. So you can see I'm on e-commerce, it's a class diagram. I'm on responsibility, see it gives me the name, it's a class diagram. So diagram types that are the default or selected for that, moving across those is helpful when you're doing modeling. When you're doing presentations, you may want a larger screen. And when we get into customizing, you can set these settings to help you get the wider view for the things that you want to see. But we'll talk about that later. All right, so I'm going to uncheck this and we're going to move on to hide status bar. The status bar is at the very bottom of your window, your main window. And I'm going to go ahead and select this. So look down here and I'm going to select this. That's hidden. I'm going to bring it back. This is important because it tells you what type of diagram you're on, when it was created, when it was modified, what zoom you have, and the size. So this may be important to you. I like to keep it up. When I'm doing modeling, when I'm in presentation mode, I may have it turned off. And a lot of these videos, I might have that turned off. But I'll leave that up to you. I'm going to uncheck it because I want to see it as I'm doing our work. Tree controls. So look over on the browser or in the default layout. So the browser's on the left. I have full row select, which I like turned on. You see that the package I'm on shows the entire package. If I turn this off, now I just see the package. I don't see the row. So as I'm going down, let me go ahead and close this. As I'm going down, you can see I'm just seeing the package selection. But if I go back to preferences, and we're going to launch preferences again, and we're going to go to window behavior. I'm going to turn that on. Now the whole row is selected, which I prefer. Next, we're going to go into track selection. Track selection is unselected at this point. I'm going to go ahead and click this on and close and show you. So you can see as I'm moving the mouse over items, it's underlined, showing the item that I have currently selected. So I'm able to make sure that when I launch it, it's going to launch properly within my work area. When you're working in cloud, sometimes you have low latency. So tracking in the response between your desktop and Sparx might be a little bit slow, but this helps you zoom in on it. I don't need it. Cloud works very well for me. I'll show you that later. So I have that unselected. So I'm going to go to preferences again. There we go, window behavior, and I'm going to turn that off. Hide scroll bars. It means just what it means. Sometimes your projects get really big and you need scroll bars. I don't want to hide them. I don't suggest to anyone to hide scroll bars unless you're doing presentation, the scroll bars in the way. You don't need the scroll bars. You can roll your mouse. There's other options for controlling where your screen is. I leave this unselected. Okay, next we're going to get into toolbars. Show diagram toolbars. So I move the preference window down here so you can see the diagram. And I'm going to select this. As soon as I check this box on, I see a diagram toolbar. This can be extremely productive when working in diagrams, and we'll show this more when we start getting into real modeling. But otherwise, if you didn't have this turned on, you're doing that type of styling in the layout tab right here in these groups. And you have to move to that if you're on a different tab, and sometimes that can slow you down. So it's very productive to have that diagram toolbar, window behavior, checked on when you're applying styles and you're building a model for a presentation separate from other models. Let me close this again. So here I have an e-commerce model. This is the exact same model with requirement elements exposed. We'll talk about that in a later video. This is an e-commerce custom model. So this is the same elements that's here. I just customized it for a particular presentation. All right. So if we go back to start, we go to preferences, we go to window behavior, having that turned on helps you do that styling very fast. You move things to the back, move things to the front, left, right, top, selections. Very powerful to have up here. Doing filters. Again, we'll get into these capabilities in a later session. I don't need it on, so I'm going to turn it off. But most of you that are starting, and there's certain times when you're working where you want to have that on. All right, I'm going to turn it back on for the next one. Use large icons. I'm going to click this, watch what happens. All these icons got large within these windows, right? So sometimes when it's late, size of the monitor you're working on, your eyes are getting tired, you may want to turn that on, turn that off, and control it as you want, all right? So I close down toolbar, still seeing large icons. You can see I'm seeing them over in all the other windows. But as far as window behavior, I don't need large icons, so I'm turning that off. All right, I'm going to skip over show toolbar, customize button. You can read the help for what that does and play with that. I don't need it. It doesn't usually work for me, so I'm going to skip over it. Other toolbars. This just gets you to other toolbars, commands, tools, keyboard, shortcuts, managing the keys. I'm going to skip over this. It's much longer. I talked about getting the toolbar. This is what we use to turn on and off our navigator and the navigator video. I like to have that turned on, but you can manage that through preferences. So we're going to move to auto hide or animate auto hide windows. So I don't check this on. So let's go ahead and check this. Let's see here. We're going to need to auto hide something. So I'm going to close this. Let's auto hide the browser. All right. So you can see that when I mouse over it, browser, I can switch between the two tabs. All right. You see that animation. All right. I'm going to go to, so in preferences, I'm going to turn that off. We're going to close. Now watch what happens. Mouse over, pops right out. Pops right out. No animation. So that's a personal preference. I'm going to go ahead and unpin this. There we go. I want it not hidden. And we're going to go to preferences again. All right. So in preferences, that's animate auto hide windows. The next one is show auto hidden windows on mouse over. This one, if you mouse over it, it pops out. If I turn this off, let's go ahead and hide this again. See, I'm mousing over and they're not popping out. I literally have to select them, pop it out, inspector, pop it out. So it's a personal preference and based off of your machine performance and those kind of things. But I like to mouse over those and for those to show when I mouse over them. All right, I'm going to skip over collaboration. We'll cover that in another video when we were talking about collaboration discussion, team collaboration, that kind of thing. But we're solo, we're working in a local environment. We won't be using this feature. I'm going to go to other, hide properties info section. This may be checked or unchecked for you. I'll hide it, but let me move this over a little bit here. If I show it, you can see it every time I click on a particular property. It just gives me information. It's kind of like tips, help, information about that. That becomes even more powerful when you start creating your own MDGs and custom tooling, but that's a much later video. So we're going to go back to preferences and we're going to go to window behavior and I hide that. I don't need to see it. Leave it up to you. Show tab icons. This is an interesting feature, show tab icons. You'll notice that we hid this browser as a tab. I'm going to go ahead and select show tab icons. You can see the tab icon shows up. And if I've got a lot of tabs, I get the icon. It helps your eyes a little bit focus on, especially when you're just starting. I don't need it, so I turn it off. All right. So that's enough on that one. Application tooltips is pop-ups. In the status bar are disabled. I leave the default as pop-ups, right? So next we're going to move to diagram. Again, I'm going to remind you to take a screenshot as you're going through each one of these to see what your current selections are. Because if you mess things up, there's no reset. The only way to reset, back to factory reset, is to uninstall, unless someone knows that they've added that feature. I don't see reset buttons anywhere here. So take a screenshot. All right. So in diagram, top to bottom, left to right, new diagram defaults, I would leave the defaults, print with border, letter size. You can very easily set this up to anything that you want when you're doing reporting, print previews and things like that. So I'll let you play around with that. Use opaque diagram elements, just leave them all checked. Play around with those later if you want. Show public features, these are the defaults. Show diagram notes. I don't think that's checked in factory. I don't have it checked, but I leave the defaults that I have here set. Now we're going to get into general. All right, in general, I don't check disable fully scoped object names. Now, I get asked this quite a bit and I usually don't tell people about this feature. So I'm going to tell you all here about this feature. First, what I want to do is close this and go to a particular element where I have fully scoped diagram right here. If I zoom in on this, you'll see service exchange, : control plane. When you start embedding elements, and we'll cover this more in more advanced sessions, some people don't want to see the parent name. See services exchange. They don't want to see that. They want smaller boxes to work with within this space, and so they don't want that to be shown. Now I'm back over to preferences, and I'm going to check this box. Look closely here what happens. Disable fully scoped. I don't see the fully scoped object names. I've disabled it, so I'm just seeing the objects, the child objects of a particular class or object element. So I get asked that a lot. I would tell you to not check that until you're absolutely comfortable with your modeling, that you have everything in the right place. Otherwise, if this is hidden, it just looks like any other element, and you're not certain you have properly scoped that element within an object. I know I spent a long time on this one, but very important subject for many of you as you're going forward. All right, the next one is allow change of created date. Remember, we're on diagrams, so this is only applicable to diagrams. I don't recommend allowing to change the create date for versioning reasons, and let me show you. So what I'm going to do is not check that, close this. I'm going to double click in a diagram and open up the properties for the diagram, and you can see the create date. It's disabled. I can't change when this diagram was created. I'm going to hit cancel, go back to preferences. We're going to go to diagram. I'm going to check this, allow create change date. Now, if I bring up the property box, I'm allowed to change the create date. I'm going to cancel because I definitely don't want to do that. It's just good practices, especially versioning, to lock down the ability to change, create dates, modify dates, even versions. You'll notice that in the diagram, and on this particular diagram, it's version 01. You're allowed to change the version, but you're going to want to know when you changed it, right? So it's very important to lock down modified date. When you're creating a document, you may create it at version 03, not 01 or whatever starting number you're using. So I think you need to make sure you're locking down your create date, especially your modified date, but your create date within your modeling work that you're doing. All right, zoom to best scale. I have this checked. When I'm opening up diagrams, I want them to fit my work area best as possible. Sometimes models get very, very large, or they're really small, and this sets. You can see down here, it set the diagram at 125%. to best fit. So you can read the help text and it'll tell you more. All right, the next one is auto pan with the middle mouse button. I leave this unchecked. I'll leave it up to you. You can go ahead and check it, click your middle mouse button, and if you need that auto pan feature, that's fine. Otherwise, I use the scroll bars and rolling my mouse or pan and zoom to move around my diagram, so I don't need that. Enable connector line jumps. This one's a big one. We call these plumbing diagrams, just moves the lines over. So I like to have the line jumps. Maybe you don't. If you've got lines that are jumping over, you see that? It's very useful, especially when you get into large, more complicated diagrams. You know, you're going to want to change that feature. Let's go ahead and turn that off, enable. We're going to turn it off. See that? Crosses over, and it just helps you separate what lines are going from where and where, and their plumbing direction, we like to say. All right, auto reload, change diagrams. I don't do this. I leave it unchecked. If you've got the performance and it's not causing you latency issues, you know, that's fine. But sometimes, you know, when you are working in diagrams with a team, you're going to want to have this checked. And I'll let you play around that when you get in a team environment to deal with that. So apply scale to clipboard. I think the default's 137%, and I just leave the default. All right. So what we're going to do now, image memory limit, leave the default 256. You have lots of choices. Probably want it smaller, but that's going to be up to your admin, your resources that you have available on your machine, your server, elsewhere, right? So the next one's a big one, diagram frame. I don't like the diagram frames in any of my views, saved images, clipboard images, printed images. I leave these all unchecked. Let me show you the difference. I'm going to select this diagram, just click anywhere in the white space. You can select elements and just copy those, but I'm going to do the whole diagram. So just select in here, hit Control C, and for this demonstration, I brought up Word. So here's Word. There it is, no frame. All right. So now we're going to go back to Sparx and we're going to go to Preferences. Come on. There we go. Diagrams. And on Save, I'm going to click all these on. All right. And then I'm going to hit Close. Now I'm going to do the same thing. Control C. I'm going to go to Word. I'm going to copy it. There's the frame. Now, it tells me it's a class diagram. It tells me the name of the diagram. And if that's interesting to you, then have at it. All right. Otherwise, I don't like that. So I'm going to go back to Preferences. I'm going to go to Diagram, and I'm going to turn all those off. All right. Now, when you're saving images, which we'll get another video on all of this, when you're saving an image, there's lots of ways to do it. Control T is one of them. And then you can save it as a PNG, JPEG, bump file, hopefully not a bump file, now SVG. You might want to have those for historical or versioning reasons, but even then I don't need that. So I keep that turned off. I'll let you read help on tooltips. I have visibility tips. I don't need those turned on. I leave these other ones turned up, and then you can set thresholds for the max amount of characters to show up in tooltips, but let you play around with that. This video, I told you, it's going to be a long subject. It's already getting too long. We're going to move into themes. All right, so I've created my own theme, and we're going to choose, I'm going to go to this one. So when I select the theme, I can see the diagram theme. Remember, these are themes for diagram, not the overall tool. Let's look at another one, dark. All right. There's dark. Let's go to soft white. All right. This is up to you, blueprint. All right. Some of these are, it's not a good habit to get into those because when you get into governance and coloring and things like that, you're going to set those and you want them to show up clearly to the reader. And if you're creating themes, ocean depths, I'll let you look through all of these to see what you like. I created my own theme. And so to do that, you just create a theme, give it a name, and save it. All right. So I'm going to launch my theme. My theme, I like to stay with default Sparx colors, white background. All right. And if I go to different modes, because the white might be too bright late at night, hard on the eyes, you know, I'm able to make changes on the fly through visual styles, right? But I have my own theme, play around with it, tired eyes. See this one? I called tired eyes. So I like to stay with this one. The most so I create my own theme. So you choose something you like and you select save, and it will ask you to give it a name, all right? So play around with that. Gradients and backgrounds. My theme doesn't like gradients, all right? So if I come back up here and let me choose, I don't know, I'm going to choose this theme. It has gradients applied to the style. Let me check this. Yeah, see, so it's applying gradients. Now I have it turned off, so it's working. I have none on gradient here. This element fill is populated, but I usually set all these to none. I'm going to go back to themes, choose mine. I don't want to spend any more time on this one, right? So gradients, themes, if you're into gradients, play around with it. You're able to change things with your gradients. Styles and colors, depending on the theme you choose, these are the default colors for elements, notes, etc. So you play around with the colors. I go with the one that gave me in the theme. I like those. They work for me. And so I just stay with those. Show custom. I'll leave this checked. Probably want to know the difference. You can read help. Click on help to learn more about that. I got to speed it up here. Appearance. Pretty much all the defaults are set in appearance. Go ahead and select help to learn more. I don't think I changed anything here. Just going over the default settings, default font settings. I don't use watermarks, but if you're in a point where you need to use watermarks, you just put what you want in the watermark, you click use watermark, and when you print that diagram on a report or email, they're sending in an email, it will have the watermark in the diagram. So sometimes I will send a watermark, says draft. If I'm just going on my team members going, hey, this is just a draft. I'm thinking out loud here. It's not final. So watermarks can be important in that way. All right, we're going to go to behavior. Behavior, pretty much leave all the defaults. I don't think I change anything. I don't like autosave changes. You might want to check this one. I'm really good about Control S. Every time I do something, Control S. If I move from one diagram to another, Control S. Anytime I see this little asterisk up here, Control S, So that asterisk next to the diagram means changes have been made. It needs to be saved. Or if you don't want to save it, undo, right? So autosave gets in the way because a lot of times things move, asterisk pops up. Please don't autosave. I'm good. I'll know when to save it. So let's see here. Auto tidy, don't need it. Grid, I'm not sure this is checked for you by default. I don't want the grid on. Sometimes I need the grid on. And if you know what grids are, so objects snap to grid. I want to show the grid. It's very light, so you don't see it. I'm going to close it. Even if I zoom in, you're not going to see it. These are 10 pixels apart. But as I drag and drop things, they're snapping to a grid. And that can be very useful for you in many situations. So I'm opening preferences. We're going to, come on, behavior. There we go. All right. I don't leave grid on. There's other ways to turn the grid on. We'll talk about that later when we get across the tabs and the ribbons. And then you can set the size. I have mine set at 10 pixels. You can set it to whatever unit of measurement you wish. 10 pixels works best for me. All right. So let's see here. Tiny line gap. I'm going to skip over that. Read the help, play around with it. And we're going to move on to sequence. So in sequence diagrams, I just leave the defaults. I'm pretty sure these are all the defaults. The most important one is show sequence numbering. So when I get into sequence diagram video, how to do those at a basic and then to an advanced level, some people like the numbering in their definitions, their lines, their messages. I don't, so I leave that turned off, right? I'm going to skip over these. Heading, font, Calibra, that's fine in my sequence. All those are just fine. We're going to move on to objects. All right, we're to the fun one. Objects. Definitely take a screenshot here because we're going to be playing around and you want to know where you started and then where you are going to end. All right, so the first one is version. By default, it's 1.0 and your phase is 1.0. I change this immediately to 0.1. I want every element, every diagram, everything I create to start at 0.1 and not a major version number. It'll be up to your development, your modeling, your project team on what you set here. So I set mine at 0.1. I'll let you do what you want. All right. So features, reference, indicator, leave defaults. I'm going to skip over that one. Warn about spaces and class names. I don't need a warning. I'm disciplined. So I do a lot of software development, system engineering. Sometimes you want class elements. You want your class elements, your object elements. You want them to be human readable, and human beings sometimes don't understand camel underscores or other types of forms. And they don't understand, why didn't you put spaces? And so you can check this one if you want to warn about spaces. If you create an element that's got spaces in it, you will get a, like this one, it's got a space in it, space in it, space in it. If you click this one, I would have been warned. This is a system collaboration diagram. It's brainstorming. So I'm working with non-technical people. So I know when to, use whatever class name convention that needs to be used. And I don't need this warning. All right. Big one, needed to cover it in depth. So there you go. All right. The next one is show stereotype icon and requirements. I'll cover this in a requirements video. I don't want this checked. I don't want it messing with my, standard requirement elements. And that'll make more sense when we get to that video. Supports composite objects. Yes. Well, they'll leave that checked. Auto size marks. Dirty. I'm going to go faster on this one. These, I'll let you play with these, allow, elongated use cases. I leave that unchecked. Play around with those. Read the help. Make sure you pop the help and read that so you understand that when you're configuring your own preferences. So I'm going to skip over these next one. Hide diagram element paste. Yeah, I don't need that. Show column stereotypes. I have that checked when you get into pools and other things. That's kind of important. Stereotypes are important in general. I'll talk about that in a separate video. All right, extend complexity. I have this checked. I'm going to leave it unchecked for a moment and we're going to close and we're just picking an item, right? So in the element, you see something called complexity and you have three choices: easy, medium, or difficult, right? And we, in some of our businesses, use this for estimating, right? So I'm going to go back to preferences. We're going to go back to objects, and we're going to go here. We're going to check this. So when I check this, close this, and open this back up to go to the complexity field, now I have more. I have easy, medium, difficult, but I have extreme and unknown. And these are really numeric values, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But I need all 5 of them when we're doing assessments, we're brainstorming, we're trying to look at the overall cost or complexity or impact to work we're doing. I'll cover this more in later sessions. When you get into, and I'll be getting into data science, AI, I'll get into estimating using data science. We use tags, so it gives us much more flexibility. I only have 5 different choices with Sparx and the complexity they give us. When we're doing assessments, sizing, workload capacity, human capacity, machine capacity, all these things, we need broader width of values to be able to estimate or assess from, right? So leave everything default. I'm not saying, don't disable spelling. I'm a creative speller. I misspell a lot. Sparx spelling engine dictionary, you can add to it, customize it. Very powerful. Read about that, play around with that. We'll get into more of that when we get into glossary, right? And there we go. We're going to move to links next. Once again, take a screenshot of your current settings before you start messing around to know where you started and where you ended. All right, I think these are all factory defaults. I don't play around with these too much. But edit connector on new, this is when you're creating a new network connection, dialog pops up, allows you to edit. That slows me down. We'll get into that more when we actually start doing some modeling. So associate default source to target. Good with that one. Generalize. Default tree. Yeah, I'll leave all of these checked. We're going to get more into these when we get into real modeling. We don't want to suppress things at this point. We definitely don't want to suppress role scope at this point. Quit linker, leave it enabled. Show help, leave it enabled. Default style in your pen width, leave it at 1. All right, let you play around with that. Customer routing, leave it at custom. We're going to talk about this more when we get it more into styling. You have direct, routed, and custom. I would leave it at custom. All right, new connector endpoints. I would not use exact placement. You can play around with this one, turn it on, and then you can force things and all that fun. I would always center to the center. So from center, move this out of the way, from center to center. And then I will play around with the lines to get them how I want. And again, when we get into line styling and all of that, orthogonal and all sorts of different ways of connecting things, we'll touch more on that later. All right. Communication colors, leave the defaults. All right. We'll talk about more about this when we get into communication diagrams, but leave the default colors. And this will make more sense after we go through that video. All right. Now we're getting into advanced. If you're in development, software development, system development, XML specifications you're going to be using a lot. You're going to configure your editor and a lot of different things. I'll cover this in another session. Same with source code engineering. Sparx can reverse engineer a lot of different languages, and you can create plugins that and define even more, right? I program in all of these languages. One of my favorites is Python. All right, I do a lot in PHP and web development. On .NET, of course, C# for me. Visual Basic, don't really use it anymore, really dating myself, but use Visual Basic a lot. When we get into scripting, automation, this will become more beneficial and useful. VB.NET, again, I use C# when I'm on .NET. Get into database engineering, especially around MySQL. That becomes extremely powerful. Let's see here, what else do I want to talk about before we quickly get off of this? So source code engineering, we'll talk about this more when we get into this subject area. It's a big one, starts at a beginner level, goes to an advanced level, but we'll cover that more at that point. All right, so we're going to close by comparing preferences, which we just worked on, with visual styles, which was the previous video. So when you're choosing your themes for your diagrams and so on, and then you go over to visual style, you'll see diagram, use current theme, right? If I change this, and let me pick something, let me go to dark, and then apply, right? Then close, then go to preferences, then go to diagram, then go to themes. See that? It changed it. I don't like to do that. So I like to use my theme. Don't want to change it. Right? I'm going to close. We're going to go back to visual style. It changed it back to, for the diagram, use current theme. All right. So very important to understand that. It's very powerful to bring up visual style. Change your theme on the fly. Just know that it changes the diagram theme that you set as your preferences. Let me check something down here. I go all the way down. I can go right back to my theme. Look at that. Hit apply. Nice. I'm going to go to something different. Desert. Apply. Right? Don't like that. My theme. Apply. Got it back. My eyes are getting tired late at night. Apply. Like it. Got it back very fast. So when you're setting up your themes between visual style and preferences, and then you're saving your own custom themes, play around with it. Just know that you can switch between the two, understand how visual style impacts your preferences and your ability to go back to where you were. All right? Okay, let's recap. I know this has been a long video. I will leave time markers down below in the description where you can move around, bookmark, and so on. But in this session, we covered preferences, general preferences, window behavior, diagram preferences, object preferences, link preferences, communication colors, XML specification preferences, source code engineering, and then we wrapped up with preferences versus visual style. Now, visual style we covered in the previous video. So if you haven't watched that yet, please select the link above and go and watch that video as well. So thanks very much for watching. I hope this has been helpful. Leave comments down below. Let me know what you think is best for helping you understand Sparx. Should these videos be long or much shorter? I will be creating shorter clips, even shorts on these series, but please let me know. Thanks again for watching, and I'll talk to you all later.